Moving on, we are all familiar with the Quad grouping, which shares a common objective of a free and open Indo-Pacific. But now there is a new West Asian Quad that has been established. It is called the I2U2. It comprises 4 nations, that is India, Israel, the UAE and the United States. And the first summit of the new grouping of 4 nations will take place next month during US President Joe Biden's in-person visit to Israel. Biden will hold the virtual summit with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The focus of the meeting will be on the food security crisis and other areas of cooperation across the hemisphere, especially where the UAE and Israel serve as innovation hubs. The virtual meeting will also outline Israel's increasing integration into the region. In 2021, the 4 nations decided to launch this new grouping, sometimes referred to as the West Asian Quad. The creation of this Quad grouping is seen as one of the key dividends of the Abraham Accords that saw the normalization of ties between Israel and the UAE. So far, the new grouping, called the I2U2, has met only at foreign ministers level. The first meeting took place during the Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar's visit to Israel in October last year. During that time, the foreign ministers of all 4 nations discussed key focus areas, which were trade, climate and maritime security, and explored possibilities of joint infrastructure projects in transportation and technology. The summit-level meet of the West Asian Quad comes at a time when the Quad grouping between the US, India, Japan and Australia has increased its engagement. Last month, the Quad met for the second time in person in Tokyo. And for more details, our principal diplomatic correspondent Siddhant Sibbal has sent us a report from the Indian capital, New Delhi. Have a look.
An idea whose time has come, I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE and US. The leadership meeting is going to take place next month. This is going to take place when the US president will be in Israel. Now, the focus, of course, is on things like food security, given that is dominating the global agenda, especially after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But nonetheless, we know that how last year the foreign ministers of I2U2, also known as West Asian Quad, met during the Indian External Affairs Minister's visit to Israel. And since then, there was, of course, talk of the foreign ministers meeting in Dubai as well. That could not happen. But now, of course, the leadership meeting happening at a time when we know that the global geopolitics is changing fast. So we now have 2 quads essentially involving India, of course, a common denominator, US, of course, as well. That's the Indo-Pacific Quad involving India, Australia, Japan and US. They, of course, face the problems relating to an aggressive Chinese behavior. And the West Asian Quad, a quad which is focusing on innovation and other things. And this quad, the West Asian Quad I2U2, is a direct outcome of the normalization of relationship between Israel and many West Asian countries. UAE, of course, is an example, and how these countries, India, US, UAE, Israel, can come together in terms of solving problems. And of course, both Israel and UAE are known as innovation hubs, so how they can help the entire region and the world. Siddhant Sibbal for WION in New Delhi.
WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.